Hello, mainstreamers and cinephiles and everybody in between. I'm Bryant.
And I'm Caitlyn.
And Operation Silver Screen is a go. Hello, welcome to Operation Silver Screen. This cinema-related operation has been created to clear our desks from stacks of open cases. What are these cases? Well, even being the film lovers that we are, Caitlyn and I have a huge backlog of must-see films that we still need to experience. So each week we'll tackle a film that either one of us or both of us still need to see. We will then provide a debrief of our week's mission, giving our outlook on the film's popularity and significance, as well as providing our opinion on whether or not it's worth seeing and other fun insight. Now, recently we've had a good summer of action almost. It's been a real manly and tough few episodes we've had. We've done Top Gun Maverick. We just got done talking about the Predator franchise with Prey and Predator itself. So, Caitlyn, what else you got going for? We even have Jaws coming up. I'm pumped up, Caitlyn. What we got next? What's our assignment this week?
Well, we actually switched things up a little bit this week. We got to go to a place where all fairy tales are made. We got to examine what makes it a true love story. See a romance that defined a generation, where dreams of princesses and white knights can come true in the seedy strip and back alleys of Hollywood Boulevard. This week, we tackled a beloved rom-com, Pretty Woman, starring Julia Roberts and Richard Gere, which is directed by the late Gary Marshall. Now, before we start talking about this movie, I do want to mention that the first part of our debrief will be spoiler-free as we talk about our overall thoughts on the film. But as we move into the classified part of the mission, there will be some spoilers on the story, but we'll be sure to give you a warning when we get to that part. So let's go and talk about why we chose to watch this film this week. Because like you said, we have been doing a lot of testosterone-filled films lately. So I think we really did want to switch things up, and we haven't done a rom-com yet on our podcast. So it's definitely a genre that I think we were lacking in our episodes.
Yeah, most definitely. And, we want to give back something to all of our audience, including the ladies.
Yeah, don't say it like that.
What, ladies?
Oh,
I'll continue saying it like that. I'll continue showing the fine
Brian
women
talking.
respect.
Yeah, okay. But this is a pretty big rom-com when it comes to rom-coms. It's the fourth highest grossing rom-com of all time. The first one was My Big Fat Greek Wedding. That one I think is still holding number one. And it gained over $400 million globally, which is amazing considering the film budget was only $14 million. It is at the moment Disney's highest grossing R-rated film. And I think it does pose an interesting question when it comes to rom-coms in the modern age, and we might talk a little bit about that later, because, rom-coms are an interesting genre. They generally are successful at the box office in the fact that they're made for a lot cheaper than you see most sci-fi or action movie budgets. So they have potential to make a lot more, but it does still fall into that mid-budget kind of movie genre, which we don't see being made as much by studios anymore. I think it has gotten more prevalent, I think, in the streaming age, but I think there's been quite a bit of a quality dip. But it is interesting that this film has done so well, and it's still beloved by people in this day and age. For this film, Julia Roberts was nominated for Best Actress at the Academy Awards. She didn't win there, but she did win at the Golden Globes for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy. She also did win a Kids' Choice Award, which it confuses me a little bit why kids are watching this movie, but she did win a Kids' Choice Award. And the film as a whole won a People's Choice Award for Favorite Comedy Motion Picture. It didn't do so well critically, but I think it was well received by the general population. And while I don't think that the critical responses are necessarily invalid, I do think it is much harder for rom-coms and women-targeted films to get a good reception, as majority of film critics, especially at that time, are male. So it's not a film that was targeted towards critics in any way. But overall, this film, I think, was a success with the general public. Was there anything else you found?
Yes. Starting with the box office. So this is the second highest international box office of any rom-com. The highest one is the Chinese film The Mermaid, released in 2016, which has $543 million, I believe. It's over $500 million. This one comes close to $500 million. But this smashed at the box office. I don't know if it would still be Disney's, you said best rated R film, but now that they own Fox, I would think Fox has a couple other rated R films that would beat this one out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not including those movies, and we might see this change once, like we do more R-rated superhero films in the future. I'm sure that's going to change, but at the moment of Disney-produced films, it is the highest grossing rated R film from Disney.
Okay, yeah, I guess it wouldn't count as Disney producing because of the merger, because Fox had produced it originally. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking things like Deadpool, which I think is still pretty up there.
Yeah, that's what I said. I feel like once Deadpool 3 comes out, like that might bump it down a little bit, but we'll see.
Rating wise, this has a 7.1 on IMDb, which is really good, especially in contrast to the ratings on Rotten Tomato, which has a 65% critic rating and a 68% audience rating. But again, like you said, this had not the greatest reviews in the beginning. And I am surprised about the audience rating, though. I wonder why that is. And again, maybe, people who weren't really into the rom-coms were watching this movie and then going and rating it. This is also just a very well-known rom-com. I'm not too big with rom-coms. I was going to ask you about that. But, I mean, like, one of my favorite movies is a rom-com, technically. But this was also in the 1001 movies to see before you die. So that's a prestigious list right there. And I couldn't find any additional facts or supporting data for this, but this was in the IMDb trivia, which says that this is one of the most successful movies aired on TV in Spain. But I couldn't find anything additional. Yeah, I couldn't find anything additional outside of that trivia. So take that with a grain of salt.
Now, you said that you're not as well versed with rom-coms, and just as far as our personal experiences with this movie, this is one that you haven't seen prior, correct?
No, I have not seen this film. It's one that's been on my list. Like, I wasn't ignoring it. I was planning to watch this one day, but it just wasn't high up there, and I don't know, I guess I was never in the mood to watch it.
So there isn't any other reason why you have been neglecting this film?
No? Should there be a reason? Are you trying to get me just to say I hate women?
No. I just mean, like, we talk about this with every film that we talk about, like, whatever reasons why you haven't watched this. So is there any reasons, or it's just because you just haven't gotten around to it?
I just haven't gotten around to it. I didn't have any pre-notions about this film. I just knew it was a rom-com. I knew there was a bit of controversy with it, but it's one that I heard a lot about. So I was like, all right, if I'm ever in the rom-com, mood, I'll go ahead and put this on. It just never really came around where I found something else.
Gotcha, I see. So for me, I think this is one I've heard a lot about. I mean, I do watch a lot of rom-coms, actually. But for me, the casting, or mainly Richard Gere, kind of prevented me from watching it. It was the same with Runaway Bride, which also stars Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. I think there was a generation where Richard Gere really was this big rom-com icon because of these two movies. And for me, he always just kind of looks so old. I mean, granted, because, I'm hearing about this as a younger person, as a teenager, and, I want my leading man to not be so old. I think I've talked about this before with a lot of, like, the old Hollywood movies, that a lot of the older leading men tend to be a lot older than their female counterparts. And I kind of saw this as a similar kind of movie growing up. But I think now that I'm older, I can see the appeal more. And also seeing that this film I don't think was necessarily targeted towards teenage me. I definitely think it is targeted towards a little bit more of an adult audience, but I think I can understand it a little bit better.
Yes, they do have a huge gap. I mean, Julia Roberts was 22 at the time, and Richard Gere was 40. So there's an 18-year difference between them. With the rom-coms, I don't know. I feel like I haven't seen a lot of the typical rom-coms. Like, it just a lot of your general ones, a lot of the ones thrown out there for the box office. But looking at it, I really do enjoy the genre, just probably not the films that really people consider it to be the definitive rom-com. I mean, Lost in Translation is a rom-com, and it's my number one favorite movie. We talked about Worst Person in the World continually. I absolutely love that film. There was a movie I watched on Netflix not too long ago, Set It Up, which I found enjoyable. Crazy Rich Asians, I love. So I like the genre. I think it's probably a little bit weaker, I guess, than most. But I don't have any prejudice to it. It's not like, I'm not calling these chick flicks, and I'm not saying I don't want to watch rom-coms because they're chick flicks. It's just, I think some are a bit on the weaker end, but that goes for genres such as like action movies. Sometimes a lot of action movies, especially during the time of the year, they're some of the weaker genre out there.
I definitely think
too.
a lot of them. Yeah, I definitely think a lot of them are just definitely mind candy, which I kind of like. I mean, my favorite rom-com is Uptown Girls. I think we talked about before, and that's a romantic comedy that's interesting because the romance in it isn't the main focus of the movie, but that is my favorite rom-com. And so I really enjoy it. I think that they can be very escapist. We talked about this film being a fairy tale, and I think that's the vibe that a lot of rom-coms try to give off.
Yeah. And also, if you separate the genres, I've seen more romance movies, and I tend to like more romance movies than comedy movies. In comedy movies, actually, speaking about weaker genres, comedy is probably that one as well. There's not really too many great comedies come out in one year, like straight comedies. And we know some of those weaker comedies, they just put out the big known comedic star of whatever year it is and get them to improvise, and it's like, all right, this is nothing.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is a lot harder for comedy to do well, and rom-coms kind of fall into that. Before we get into our opinion of this film, I do want to give you guys a quick plot summary just in case you haven't seen this film and need to get up to speed. So this film follows Edward, played by Richard Gere, who is a wealthy businessman on a business trip to LA. After experiencing some car troubles on the Hollywood Boulevard Strip, he ends up picking up what many refer to as the prostitute with a heart of gold named Vivian, played by Julia Roberts. After spending the night together, Edward offers Vivian a business opportunity, paying her to stay with him for a week, but neither of them were prepared for romantic feelings that were to start to form between them. Like I said, this is a very iconic romantic comedy. I mean, people talk about it all the time. But it is definitely a film that, it's prone to controversy just because of the subject matter. It is an R-rated film, which is kind of, I wouldn't say is the norm for a lot of earlier romantic comedies, or at least not from my experience, at least from my perspective. I don't think it's a norm. So this did have definitely some mature subject matter, and the way that it handled the plot, I think, was different than what I expected going into this film. But what did you think overall about this movie?
Like I said before, I'm not too well versed into the rom-coms or kind of your typical, your poster rom-coms. When you mention rom-coms and you start to think about, all the, not cliches, but the tropes that go into the film. But with this, I had an enjoyable time with this movie. More than I expected. There's nothing heavy with this movie, and in Disney fashion, this is actually a Disney movie. This plays like a fairy tale, but of course it's a little bit more serious because of the subject matter. However, it's not too serious. I never busted out laughing, but the humor had me smiling throughout. What I really loved about this film was the chemistry between Richard Gere and Julia Roberts. This is exemplary chemistry right from the beginning, and it continues throughout the film. Like, I see why their test reading went so well, and why they went on to do another film together. I'm actually interested in seeing that film just so I can have more time watching them together. Because I think it's just, yeah, it's just great. It's like, this is how you do it. I think this movie has some issues in the writing, especially when you find out how this movie was made. That doesn't really surprise anyone. There's something big in here, and we'll go ahead and talk about it in spoilers. All I'll say is kind of relates to West Side Story a bit. This isn't the strongest and deepest of films, but the characters have life and they do have some development. Mixed with the humor and fun, I had a great time.
Yeah, I'll agree that the chemistry between Julia Roberts and Richard Gere, they did have amazing chemistry, and they did do some chemistry tests and meetings before filming. You talked a little bit about the history of this film, and you said it was a light-hearted film, but the original script by writer J.F. Lawton was definitely a darker drama than what we have now. In that movie, Vivian was a drug addict, and it definitely wasn't a romantic comedy, but then the script was sold to Disney. Disney brought in Gary Marshall, and the movie, originally titled $300,000, ended up being rewritten several times. It took several rewrites and hiring and firing of extra writers to become the story it was today. Like I said, it was a darker movie. It originally ended with our lead, Vivian, being discarded on the street with her money, and it kind of ends there for the most part. Julia Roberts was originally cast in the 3000 movie, but she was cut for a moment from the film when it was sold, but then she managed to get the role back when it was discovered she was going to sign with another movie. That's when Disney was quick to hire her back. And it was because of Julia Roberts that we got Richard Gere in this film as well. He was very uncertain about if he wanted to be in this movie. I think he originally was interested in it when it was $3,000, but with the new changes, he wasn't entirely sure. So to convince him to be in this movie, Gary Marshall brought Julia Roberts to Richard Gere's apartment, office, whatever it was, and just left him alone. He just stuck them in the room together and left to see how their chemistry would unfold. And they said they had great chemistry. They were flirting and talking, and at some point, Gary called Richard Gere back to ask him how it was going while he was sitting there with Julia Roberts, and Julia Roberts then slipped him a post-it note that says, please take this role, please say yes. So that's how he was convinced into this film. Another interesting fact about the original script as well is that at one point Werner Herzog was asked to direct this film at the urging of Richard Gere. I believe they are friends, but he turned it down. But it's interesting how much this story changed, because it definitely was going to be a more serious movie.
Richard Gere, he actually didn't like the first script, and since they made changes, they pitched it to him again, seeing if he'll like the new script. And again, he's like, I'm not feeling it, but like you said, Julia Roberts slips you a post-it note. You do whatever that post-it note tells you to do.
And that's true. And I thought that her character in this film was very lively. She had a lot of personality that really, I think, was a drawing factor in this film when watching this film.
Most definitely. I loved Julia Roberts in this, and I've never been a Julia Roberts fan. I haven't seen her in too much. Honestly, I can't think of one movie off the top of my head that I've seen her. Again, she plays usually a character in a genre I'm not so well versed in, so I never really got to see like what all the hype was. But yeah, like right from the beginning, she's just like adorable to watch. Yeah. And then later in the film, she walks out in that red dress, and you're like, God dang! Like, all right, I get it.
Yeah, I know that Julia Roberts is a huge actress. I've seen a lot of films with her in it, but I think that her like peak era was maybe a generation before us. That also might be part of the reason why we didn't really connect to her back then. And I'm glad you brought up the costuming. I think that the costuming in this film was so well done. And some of the styles that Julia Roberts wore in this film are copied today. I'm talking about her post-transformation wardrobe. Her initial costume for her prostitution outfit, the one that she's wearing on the streets when Richard Gere picks her up, I think it was based off a like popular swimsuit design from what I read. But at one point she has a red jacket on to cover her outfit and to cover herself in the cold. And this was actually something that they bought off the street. They just ran into a woman who was wearing this red jacket, and Gary Marshall said, "We need to get that jacket. Go pay her to get that jacket." And so she did. They gave him the jacket, and I think it was a great addition. I think I love that jacket, to be honest. I think that was a great costume piece. As far as the humor in this film, I did really enjoy it. Like you said, there wasn't very many moments where you were laughing out loud, but you smiled throughout. I think I did have a couple moments where I did laugh. I can't particularly remember which moments it was, but I agree. I definitely was smiling throughout the film. How did you feel about the progression of the relationship in this movie?
I think this is where the movie is, like, where the writing isn't the best. The movie's probably a little too light. I think there could have been some more development with it, and also it's a bit predictable. I mean, you have one character who is very lively and, you know, goes with the flow, and you have another character who is the stuck-up businessman. Though, of course, there's a little bit more to them, and then they kind of start to balance each other out. But they do develop. I appreciate that. Like, when things happen, it didn't come out of nowhere. I could relate it to something else that happened. And again, their chemistry, it makes sense why they eventually, you know, start to fall in love with each other. I think some better writing could have made it even more, made the script more tight when it comes to development, and again, say a little bit, but for being a nice light movie, I didn't have any qualms with it.
There's a couple scenes in the movie where Edward has a day off, or he takes off from work. He quits for the day, and he spends the day with Vivian instead of going to work. And I wish I had gotten more from that scene. I wish there had been a little bit more. There's a shot of them just going to the park and they're enjoying each other's company, but I do wish there had been a little bit more in that scene just to develop their relationship together outside of, you know, all the drama that was going on in the other scenes and the conflict.
Well, you gotta pay extra for that, Caitlyn.
Yeah, that's true. But I do think that this was a believable relationship. Like you said, the chemistry was there, and I think that both of them had a lot of character development, which kind of helped urge that romantic relationship along as well. Now, it's not a rom-com without a meet-cute. Every rom-com has a meet-cute, and this one, I think, starts a little bit untraditionally. Richard Gere, he's driving a car that he doesn't really know how to drive along the Hollywood Boulevard, and he runs into some trouble with this car, and he ends up pulling over to the side of the road. It is then he picks up Julia Roberts, who is there. She's looking for work, and she comes to him thinking that he might be a good candidate. So she enters his car, and she kind of helps him drive this car because, like I said, he doesn't really know what he's doing with his car. She, on the other hand, I guess she has brothers. Is that what it said? She knows a lot about cars. She's a very capable, smart woman. And so she says, you know what, I'm going to drive this for you. Or he lets her drive his car for him that he was borrowing. And they kind of just hit it off from there. It is then that he takes her back to his hotel, and they do spend a night together. What was your thought about the initial meet cute? And then we'll talk about the night that they spent together.
I like the meet cute because it starts very innocent like, and both characters are kind of in a vulnerable state. One from her just walking off the street, of course, but then also him struggling with the car and being lost. You know, they kind of complete each other in that moment. Julia Roberts to me was the hero, of course, because he was killing that car. Like, as someone who drives a stick, hearing those gears grind, I'm just like, oh God, no. But yeah, they really hit it off. And like I said, in my opinion of this, that chemistry starts off right from the beginning. And it had me interested, like, how far it was going to go. Because, yeah, he was just asking for directions. And he did pay for her time and everything, but it also, like, you could tell that he wanted more, like, he was just kind of in the moment, and they're both, like, curious about each other, so you kind of start to wonder where this is going to go next.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Now, when it comes to the actual first night that they spend together, I will say I was a little surprised and a little bit confused. I think this is from me coming from a place where I thought this was more of a PG-13 rated movie rather than an R, because I thought, it was going to go the Disney route. He doesn't sleep with her. They just they just stayed up all night talking kind of thing, So at first I wasn't really sure what his motivations were with this night. Like, obviously he's a lonely guy, but I wasn't entirely sure where his mindset was. But then when obviously they do sleep together, I was like, oh, okay.
I was a little surprised too. I thought they were going to do the whole thing where they stay up all night together, they're talking, and they fall asleep, and he wakes up and he sees the empty bed and he goes, oh, he just gives out that sigh, and she comes out of the bathroom and he lightens up.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was going to be something like that. But no, he does actually go and he sleeps with her. And I mean, I like that in that, like, writing wise, I like that. I think it was a bit more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And also it was kind of, the movie wasn't shunning away from things. Like,
yeah,
the movie,
I agree.
The movie was like, hey, this is where we are. This is the setting. This is what is going to happen. And they're not trying to really doll up anything.
Yeah, and I mean, after that, when he proposes that she spend a week with her, and they definitely do have a sexual relationship, as well as that just being a companion and someone to go to events with him. But that was an aspect of the story that I didn't know that was going to be in this film. So I was shocked, but I do think it was realistic, and I think it added some good scenes too with the movie as well.
Yes, definitely agree with that. It's not something I was expecting going this movie. Especially if I knew this was Disney before going in, I would have not expected this even more so.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was also like when they did have sex, one thing I appreciate the movie for is that they didn't show a lot. I sometimes think that a lot of sex scenes are just there because the director can, and it's just a way to get sex on film, or it's to appeal to the male gaze even more, or even a female gaze. But here it showed the romance and the intimacy with them, and a bit of foreplay, and then they go ahead and cut. And I think it keeps it one realistic, and then it keeps the romance in it, and it doesn't make the sex feel icky. Like, it doesn't, no one's clutching their pearls or anything like that. It's what it is. It's part of life, and it's nice. In this movie, it portrays it well, I believe. Especially with the subject matter that they're handling. They handle it well.
Yeah. I think that piano scene is definitely iconic, and I think that definitely showed their chemistry really well, both their just emotional and physical chemistry. And speaking of that piano scene, that actually was a song that was composed by Richard Gere. I guess he just played it from muscle memory and they kept that in. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, they weren't actually supposed to have sex during that scene, but Julia Roberts walked in while Richard Gere was playing that song and just couldn't help herself.
I believe it.
Yeah, when he tells everybody to get out of the room, he wasn't just talking to the extras in there. He's talking to the directors, Gary Marshall. He's like, everybody, out.
The cameraman just kind of happened to be there, happened to weasel his way in.
And I mentioned the extras and the cast just now in that joke, but I do want to talk about the cast because you have Jason Alexander as the lawyer, the squirmy lawyer. He's great in this, and this was like his first big role. This is before Seinfeld. Who I really loved in this movie, though, and this is my number one favorite character. I have this guy written a couple times in my notes, and that is Hector Elizondo, who plays Barney. Barney was the man in this. He was the backbone of this film. Barney is the type of guy who hides bodies for politicians.
Yeah.
Like, he pays people off. He takes care of things. Like, he talks to the press and he works out the story. Like, I love that for him, especially in the way he gets introduced. It's a real nice moment again. We're talking about chemistry. chemistry isn't always about intimacy and being in love with each other. It can be a friendship as well. It could be platonic. And I think his chemistry with Julia Roberts was very nice. It was almost like a kind of a mentor relationship with her. And at first you think that he's going to be this manager who's going to be stuck up, and he was going to look down at her for her position. But when they get in the office, it's nothing like that. They really subvert the expectations. And also, they just have a very cute interaction. I love the way Julia Roberts nods her head during that scene and still looking up at him. I don't want to give too much away for those who haven't seen it, but it's a great scene.
Yeah, and you haven't seen The Princess Diaries?
No, I haven't. Is he in The Princess Diaries?
He is. So The Princess Diaries also is directed by Gary Marshall, so they must have a good working relationship. And he plays a similar character in that film as well. He plays kind of like the bodyguard with a heart of gold, and he kind of has that similar relationship with Mia in The Princess Diaries as he did with Julia Roberts in this one.
I've seen bits and pieces of Princess Diaries, and every time I kept thinking about Hector in this role, I was like, I feel like we've seen kind of this butler character before, this butler and manager bodyguard with a heart of gold, and is the only one looking out for this individual. And Princess Diaries did keep coming up in my head, but I haven't seen enough of that movie, so I couldn't put an image to mind. So yeah, that makes sense. And they do have a great working relationship because Gary Marshall, Disney didn't want to hire Hector at first. Gary Marshall paid Elizondo out of pocket for this. And then Disney was like, all right, fine. You want to pay him out of pocket? Fine. We'll give you the money. So they repaid Gary Marshall. Yeah. And I'm glad he's in this film.
Yeah. I know Kathleen Marshall, his daughter, is also hotel staff in this film, and she also is in The Princess Diaries. So it definitely was a little bit nostalgic watching this film because there were a lot of things that reminded me of that movie. What did you think about her friend? I'm blanking on her name.
Kit DeLuca?
Yes.
She was cool. She was the quirky best friend. Not really too much to her, but when she was there, I believe she did good for the role that she was in.
Yeah, I think she definitely was going to have a bigger role when it was $3,000 in that film, because I think there are some people that said that she had gotten sick. She definitely was a drug addict. I think there's a little bit more focus on her relationship with Vivian in that film.
That was one of the rumors about the ending, was that Kit DeLuca had OD'd, but the original writer, he stated, no, that's not what was going to happen. What was going to happen is, one, what you said, she just ends up on the street, he throws the money at her, but then it kind of ends bittersweetly, where her and Kit DeLuca then go to Disneyland together, because that's always been Kit DeLuca's wish, is to go to Disneyland. And she asks Julia Roberts' character, like, hey, can I get one of those balloons? And she says, yeah, sure, babe. We'll get you one of those balloons.
I always wish that her character would have been in this film a bit more, because I think she did kind of give like a bit of fresh air to the cast. I liked her character, but I don't think she was given much.
Sorry, I was looking at the runtime. Yeah, this is a 2-hour movie, but they could have probably done a little bit more with her. I think if they were going to be more serious with this movie, she would have been more involved, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
You mentioned that this movie was rated R, and I found that interesting because I don't think this is a rated R movie. I think this is a PG-13 movie, and I think was rated R because this was a time in America. I mean, we're still in this time where prostitution is looked down upon, sex work is looked down upon, and it's something that's been in recent topics of how, what the perspective and the stigma of sex working should be versus reality. And I think, yeah, because you said this won a Kids Choice Award, which I found really surprising that they would even allow that nomination. But I think that also it goes into why the critics had a problem. You said that mainly men were criticizing this movie, and I think looking at this subject matter, they were already turned off by it. They were appalled by it, which we were talking about Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I believe, with one of the women, and like how there was this certain standard that was put towards them, like a way that they had to act and behave. No, it wasn't Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Are
I
you talking
forget
about
what
But
we
I'm
were
a
talking about.
Cheerleader?
Yeah, but I'm a cheerleader. That's the one.
Yeah.
So it's yeah. I think they're like one. I think it affected the critic ratings, and also I believe that this is not a rated R movie. This is a PG-13 movie. I'm surprised they didn't push for the PG-13, but I think Touchstone really wanted to have a rated R movie. They wanted to have a rated R movie. I mean, sometimes a rated R movie can be beneficial. I think today, now people are seeing that, but there was not too long ago, there was a good time span when everything was getting a PG-13 rating. Like even one of the Predator movies, I think it was The Predator, they were pushing for a PG-13 rating at first. I was like, no, we're not doing a PG-13 rating with Predator. How are we going to, it's just going to be cut away from every good kill.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that, while I think it pushed things more than I thought it would, I don't think it was at the level that an R-rated movie would. But I do think it was the subject matter that was decisive for that. And as far as the critics, it wasn't necessarily that men were critiquing it more. It's just that in general, as a profession and as who gets a platform, critics are mostly made up of men, especially during that time. They tend to be the ones with more platform in those professions as a film critic.
And I would think even it was like a certain type of men, and not trying to be, not trying to be, I don't want to use this word. I don't want to use the W word, but like a lot of positions of power. We've seen Hollywood. Hollywood has a structural issue that's getting fixed nowadays. With the people in power and the people criticizing and structuring things and moving things along. So I would believe back then in the 90s, like your top critics were not the most diversified individuals out there. And no, I'm not trying to I'm not talking about just race. I'm talking about their ideals, beliefs, where they come from, everything. Like being diversified just as a total human being. I don't think that the Critics Association nor Hollywood really was that diversified originally. And I think, again, you couldn't make this movie PG-13, and then because people think that parents are going to be like, oh, but how am I going to explain to my kid that, people pay for sex? Well, if you're bringing a PG-13, one, they should be a teenager. Two, I mean, that's what parental guidance is for. Just talk to your child. Just tell them, like, yeah, people pay for this. I'm like, all right, cool. Then you move on with your life. Like, what's going to happen to your kid? You think they're going to run off right then and there? They're going to take a Greyhound bus and go to Hollywood Boulevard?
Yeah. Now, I don't think all criticism of this film is unfair or unjust. I think that there's some valid criticism about some of the mixed messaging with the movie, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. And also just, there is a sense of frivolity that comes with rom-coms no matter how you spin it. And I know that some criticism was calling it frivolous, but at the same time, yes, but that's also the genre.
I think that happened a lot too, like during the 20th century, where there was just some prejudice when it came to certain movies. Because now you'll see a lot online, and they'll ask, like, were critics wrong back then? Or we'll hear of cult classics because originally they were panned by critics. Granted, we don't know if like new recent films that were bad are gonna come up later, but we are looking at a lot of the films from back then and going, hey, this really wasn't too bad. And it was something else. There was some kind of possible prejudice with it. And then sometimes, they hit the nail on the head and they were right, despite the suspicion of prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
Prejudice?
Yeah, sure. I think as far as weaknesses of this film, I think Richard Gere might be the biggest weakness himself. I did love their chemistry, and I do think he does have character development in this film, but he's also kind of an ass. There's things he does in this movie, but I'm like, all right, you're kind of not the best. Like, he wasn't very nice to her at times. Kind of treated her like her child other times. Like I said, they had good chemistry, but I definitely think, Julia Roberts truly is the shining star, and Richard Gere's character was kind of secondary.
Yeah, this really is Julia Roberts' movie, and that's why I say the writing was kind of weak with the development sometimes because yeah, Richard Gere's character, I mean, he was originally wrote to be very manipulative and and like you said, a jerk, but I feel like they didn't when they were doing the cuts and the rewrites, they didn't completely rewrite that position, so it feels a
Hmm.
little bit off in the movie. I mean, I don't mind it. I wouldn't mind it so much if they came back and addressed it and did some development from it. I would say by the end of the film, I feel good about the relationship. Like if this was a real relationship, I wouldn't have any issues with it going forward. I wouldn't be thinking to myself like, oh man, he's gonna this relationship is doomed. No, by the time they get to the end, he does seem like a changed man, but I think some stronger writing could have made it more convincing.
Maybe. I know that there's been some criticisms that, his way of solving conflict is just throwing money at things, which I can kind of see. And when there's some things that he does in this film that were questionable in that regards. But I think a lot of his character development comes within his business life, and I think this film wanted to stray away from going too much into the details of his profession because they didn't want to, it would be kind of boring if they did. But at the same time, I think that they could have done a little bit more in that regards because I think that they kind of leave it all kind of hazy. There's a point where he's uh, making a good change in his business to become a better person, become a better businessman, and he just says, well, we'll leave the details to someone else, and he walks out. And I'm like, okay, but what is your details? Like, what are you actually trying to do here?
Yeah, I remember that. I was like, wait, did he just walk away from that meeting? He needs to explain some things.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the business, I actually liked the explanation for this and how the business itself developed for two reasons. One, I think it's a common complaint in movies when they own a business, but they really don't explain what they do. They just say business things like crunching numbers and moving stocks. They don't actually, or somebody's like, I got to get that big promotion. What is it that you do? Oh, I look at
Hmm.
numbers. All right. This, they really go into corporate rating, which was actually a big topic during that time where you had these giant companies breaking down these small companies and going after things like the Rust Belt. And I like that explanation and I like what that added to his character because one thing I get tired of when they have a businessman is that the issue is he works too much. We see it a lot in Christmas movies where they say, oh, he's working too much. He's working too much. He doesn't spend any time with his family. Which
Hmm.
then other times, like the person has to provide, like they can't leave their position that they're in right now. You have to understand that they got to work. But here, it's not that he's just, yeah, he works a lot, but that's not the main problem. The main issue is that he doesn't build anything and he's conflicted by that. His business is by destroying other businesses. He works, he gains money in the rubble and he has like a moral conflict with that. And I thought that was an interesting aspect, especially, that's something that was done in the 90s and nobody learned from that writing wise. We're still back to business, 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 stocks, trade, crunching numbers, big promotions. You work too much.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think they say what his business is and how he operates, but I think as far as how he's going to enact positive change and how her influence have changed with his business life, I feel like that I could have used a little bit more details. They personify it through this old man whose company he's looking at, but I think a little tiny bit more just to prove that, okay, this isn't like a one-off thing. Like he actually is changing.
Okay. I would say that yeah, I understood what he was going to do, but when you said that you wanted something to make it seem like it wasn't just a one off, I would
Mm-hmm.
have liked that to see like how he's going to continue outside of this
Mm-hmm.
deal. But again, I am convinced that he is a changed character by the end of the film. So again, I'm not going to fault the writing too much. It could have been better, but it's not bad. It's not poor storytelling, poor writing. It could have been stronger.
Mm-hmm. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that too when we get to the spoilers because we can talk about how the ending was handled with this film. Is there anything else you want to talk about in our spoiler-free section?
I mentioned the corporate rating, and another way that it relates to this story, and the reason that it was brought into this story is because corporate rating was actually leaving families broken and leading girls to work out on the streets, which is how the writer was inspired by this. And when he was talking to some of them, he found out about the corporate rating and the impact that it was having. So it was a nice little social commentary in there.
Yeah, that is. So let's switch gears a little bit, no pun intended, and talk a little bit about the influence that this film had. You know, we talked about how this was Julia Roberts' movie for sure, and she really wasn't a big actress at that time. She was kind of a nobody. So this film really boosted Julia Roberts to stardom, and at one point she was one of the highest paid actresses in Hollywood. I'm not sure if she still is, but at one point she was. We also mentioned Jason Alexander. He said that this film, you know, his popularity in this helped him get his role in Seinfeld, where he's big from. And Richard Gere, we said he became a bit of a rom-com icon. They both rejoined in Runaway Bride, as we mentioned, which I think I like this film a little bit better than Runaway Bride. I've only watched it once, but I don't really remember too much of it. But Gary Marshall, too, he also became a more prominent director. You know, prior he had only worked on Cheers, and he was known for his film Beaches, but he definitely became a big rom-com director. He did Princess Diaries, like we said. Princess Diaries and Pretty Woman are probably his biggest films, but he also did Raising Helen. There's a couple other movies in there, and he did all of the, like, Valentine's Day, New Year's Eve type movies as well. This movie was also adapted to a Broadway stage musical in 2018. That was pretty recent. I didn't get to see much about the reception of that musical, but it was premiered in 2018.
I didn't know that you said he wrote for Cheers or directed it?
He directed for Cheers.
Yeah, because he did a lot of sitcom work. The biggest, though, was Happy Days that he wrote for.
Oh, I might be getting Cheers. No.
Yeah, I don't think Cheers. I think you mean Happy Days.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting Cheers and Happy Days confused. Same difference. One of his old sitcoms.
Another influence that this had, and we saw it kind of with The Matrix just for a little bit. We've seen this with other films as well, which are the outfits. You mentioned before, Julia Roberts, a lot of styles have been pulled from this movie, even in today. Also, Lotus car sales. The car that he was driving in the beginning, Richard Gere, that one boosted up sales for the vehicle. And that's a vehicle made in the UK. They originally spoke to Ferrari and Porsche to get a vehicle in the movie. However, when they saw the concept of the film, they didn't want to be affiliated with a movie that was about a street worker. Again, that's where I think there was a harder perspective when it came to sex working back then. For the significance of this film, like you said, Julia Roberts became a big star, as well as Gary Marshall. This was his first time directing. And another significant play here was Disney. This was, I don't know if this would be considered Disney's first rated R property, but they're the owners of Touchstone Pictures. I'm not even sure if Touchstone Pictures still does work today. If you're a 90s kid, maybe early 2000s, go ahead, look at the logo for Touchstone Pictures and you'll recognize that logo. I've seen that logo quite a bit, but not recently. But I remember seeing it a lot growing up.
Did they do the Homeward Bound? For some reason,
Was
that's
that
what my
animated?
mind's going to. No.
Not sure. But this was Touchstone Pictures' first live-action movie. They wanted to do a live-action movie, and also Disney wanted to have an adult section. So they put that task on Touchstone Pictures, which, thinking about it, that's probably what they're going to do with Fox now. Fox is probably going to be running like their adult section. I know everybody was worried during the Fox merger because they're like, oh, they're going to tone down Deadpool and all these other things. Like, hey, Disney's in it for the money. Don't think that they may do it under somebody else's name, but they're not. When they're praising Disney and everything, yeah, they're looking morally, exemplified. But when they go under a different name, when Mickey Mouse puts on a different hat, when he goes into the back part of the club, whole different story.
Yep.
Oh, Touchstone Pictures, they produced Who Framed Roger Rabbit,
Oh,
which
okay.
is an adult animated film.
Yeah, it
That
is.
one has a lot of innuendo. Nightmare Before Christmas. Yeah, they done a lot of films. I'm not seeing anything here too recent. Oh, okay, never mind. They stopped 4 years ago, 2017, December 20th. They
Oh.
were defunct. I think that's how you pronounce it, defunct.
Hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, they were founded in 1984, so 6 years before this movie was made. So, but yeah, when I saw this logo, I was, I've seen this. I was like, oh yeah, Touchstone Pictures. What are they doing nowadays? It's like seeing the Orion Pictures, which they made a recent movie
I don't know who
as
they are.
well. Uh, Again, if you see the logo, you'll
If I
know.
see the logo, yeah, I'm sure I'll know. I know there has been a lot of conversations about its significance as a feminist or not feminist movie, both in its positive impacts in feminism and its negative impacts. And it's largely criticized for having some conflicted messages as far as its feminist messages. You know, on one hand, it gives a sense of humanity to sex workers, but on the other hand, it's only to certain sex workers, right? Because it makes a point to show that she's too good for this line of work and she's not a drug addict and she still, even then, needs to be saved from her profession by, you know, the white knight. But then there's also like this sense of empowerment that she has with the we say who, we say when, we say how much line. So it kind of goes back and forth on what it kind of feels about sex work as a profession. But I definitely think that, you know, would this be a woman of color or someone, you know, not quite as privileged as, you know, pretty Julia Roberts, like this would have been a different story.
Yeah, I think that topic's been brought up in a lot of things, especially with rom coms. And it comes to if these people weren't so pretty, would it really work out like this?
Mm-hmm.
It's not even white privilege; it's just pretty privilege for
Well, I
for a
think it's
lot of these
both.
movies. Yeah,
I
yeah,
definitely think it's
it's definitely
both.
both.
And it
But
definitely shows that she has some options too about what she's going to do with her life. I don't think she truly is as down and out as other people in her position.
I was worried about that going into this because I thought that was or I knew that to be the controversy. And how I think it goes around that, or how it doesn't fall too much into that. Because also, this is a Cinderella story, which is a story I have a problem with. Like the Cinderella story, it's a movie adored by many, especially girls. It's the Prince Charming coming to save you from a horrible situation, and Cinderella has no personality nor does anything to get out of her situation. She just mutters stuff under her breath as she washes the floors. And that's it. And then Prince Charming comes in to save her. However, I think two things in this movie combat that. And I think one is that, or three. First, this movie is really Julia Roberts' movie, like we mentioned before. She really is the one that we spend a lot of time with. And I think she has enough character to her that she's not just some girl picked up off the street. Like she has her own flaws, and she has her own pros. And I think that really helps out. She's not just a blank slate eccentric woman. She's not there just to compliment Richard Gere. They're there to complement each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's is mutual. I also think that when she's at the end of the film, when she's about to leave, as she's packing her things, I think that shows that she has a choice. Like you said before, she says who, when, and what. And at the end of the film, like she's getting ready to leave. So she has the power to get up and leave. So when Richard Gere comes in, he's not so much saving her. He's requesting her to join him because she doesn't need saving. She's about to go off and do her own thing. She's about to go off and she says she's going to look for a job. She believes in herself. She's confident at this point and she wants to go ahead and do something. So she's not really being saved at the end of the film. They're choosing to be with each other. And I think that helps combat the controversy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think just we see that like with some classic, I don't want to say rom-coms, but some classic romantic novels like Jane Eyre and Pride and Prejudice. You know, those stories are very much about two people who had to, you know, go through some character building by themselves and in themselves before they could come together as a good, healthy relationship. And I think you kind of see this there. I just meant as far as the only thing that I think is holding it back mostly is just the idea that she's kind of this special snowflake, that she's not like the other prostitutes because she's educated. She's actually smart. She has ambitions. I'm like, yeah, but so does everyone else. So I think that's where it kind of, it kind of does a little bit of a disservice to sex workers. But I think generally our perception on sex work is so different, and it's constantly changing, and it's full of nuance, and especially with like OnlyFans and things where, you do have something that could or may not potentially give more power to the sex worker themselves. But, it's it's a nuanced topic. It's a very difficult topic to really dive into, especially on a platform like this where we don't have a lot of time to really dive into it. But there are definitely conflicting messages as far as whether or not this film is feminist or not, or if this romantic relationship is feminist or not. So that's just something that I think that, you should be aware of going into it.
Sorry, I went and I replied to a different controversy. I see the one that you're talking about. Sorry, I had that one kind of locked and loaded, if you couldn't tell. And yeah, I see what you're talking about. And it's something it's something that's going to be personal it's going to depend on your own perspective, ideals, and beliefs, how you imagine that. I can't really comment on that controversy. That's going to be up to the viewer themselves. I think that's one that it really is. It's hard to talk about. It really is. Like, it's because would this have worked with a different person? But yet we have nothing to really look at and compare it to. But it does make you wonder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So moving away from that, who would you recommend this movie to? Would you recommend this to a general audience, to cinephiles? Would you recommend this to just women? Would you recommend it to a larger demographic?
Not just any women, pretty women.
Yeah, there you go. That's when you go with, but all women are pretty, in my mind. No. If you have a great personality.
I know what I said. I would recommend this to the general audience. Cinephiles, I don't know if there's really anything there for the cinephiles, unless, cinephiles look to watch all movies. And I think if you're looking to, switch it up a bit and watch a rom-com, watch something light. Because you and I, we talk about that a lot. We don't always like to watch heavy things. We like to watch something light from time to time. We like to mix it up. One of my favorite movie marathons, one of the most interesting movie marathons I had when I was first really getting into film, I watched Goodfellas, then I watched Scarface, and then I watched Pretty in Pink.
That's a fun combination.
Yeah, it was a nice combination, and it works.
You watched Scarface in a movie marathon, though? That movie is long.
I also watched Goodfellas.
Oh yeah, Goodfellas is pretty long too, isn't it? Isn't it like 3 hours too? Whew.
Yeah.
Damn.
And then Pretty in Pink to end it off.
Props to your perseverance.
Yeah. Well, this was also when, like I said, that I was first getting into movies. So I was like, this was a whole new world open up to me. Not first getting into movies, like I just found out about the moving pictures. I mean, like, this is like when the cinephile was starting to be born. Mm-hmm. This is when I started being introduced to good content, classics. And when I pulled up, what movies should I watch? There was over 1,001 movies.
Yeah.
So actually, I had that book, and I would just flip through the book a couple times, and then I'll just put my finger down, and be like, all right, I'm watching that.
Jeez, okay, yeah, I can do that. I gotta be in a certain mood.
Yeah, well, that's why I said I flipped it a couple times, because sometimes I'm like, I don't know about that one.
Gotcha.
Like, I didn't lift my finger up. I'm still switching.
So I agree. I think that a general audience would definitely enjoy this a lot. My question is, well, we'll get into that a little later. I was going to say, would a younger audience also like it? But we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so I think that for cinephiles, I'm not sure that this is like the one rom-com I would recommend if this isn't a genre that you usually watch. But I do think it's an enjoyable movie that can be enjoyed by pretty much anyone if you're, you just want something light.
Yeah, unless you find like sex work to be completely sinful and you can't get past that, then this movie's going to be great for you.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say before we get into the spoilers?
So another way that they combat the controversy that could have been given in this film is that Richard Gere's character is not so much saving her from like a horrible situation. It's not like she's cracked out, she's being beaten up by the time that he finds her. I mean, she really is kind of, her life isn't like, yeah, she's doing sex work. It's not that great, but she's, it's not like she's in a gutter or anything like that.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and move into the classified portion of our podcast. This is where we're going to be talking about spoilers. We're going to talk about our opinions a little bit more in depth with spoilers there, but we're also going to be talking about if it holds up, if it has withstood the test of time. We're also going to be talking about our overall rating and our final comments on this film. So there's a lot to still talk about. So if you haven't watched this film, just go ahead and watch it. Get your popcorn ready, sit down, just give it a watch, and then come back and listen to the rest of this podcast. Just as a quick content warning, for the next couple minutes or so as we talk about our spoilers, we are going to talk about some sensitive topics. We are going to talk about sexual assault that happens in this film. So just as a little bit of a content warning, if that's something you're sensitive to, please just skip ahead until our rating. And we'll put some time tags in the comments or the summary of this as well. So as far as our spoiler discussion, I think one thing that we can talk about is how this movie resolves. It's not a rom-com unless there's some kind of conflict that pushes these two apart. And originally, Richard Gere offers Julia Roberts, or Vivian, the opportunity to put her up in a nice condo for her to be, when he comes back to town, he has someone he can visit, which isn't, not the most romantic. She says, I don't really expect this in my fairy tale imagination. This isn't what I want. And then, so he has to go take the extra steps then once he realizes that he does want to be with her to, do the grand romantic gesture. What did you think about those portions of the movie?
I think it moved a little quick towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I felt like it was almost a snap. Like, again, I understand how it got there, but it felt a little quick to me. I think they had almost 2 falling outs. So I don't know, I feel like the story could have been moved around a bit to make it flow a little better. Because they had their one issue where, yeah, that gets brought up, but then they had their other issue when she finally leaves. Mm-hmm. So I feel like there was a up, and then it's like, oh no, that's not the climax, and then we're kind of up in the air for a little bit before we get to the climax.
Yeah, I agree.
I didn't like the whole lawyer, Stucky's character attempting to rape her, or at least molest her. I think that was something, again, that was unneeded.
I agree. It felt a little off with the setting of the film, and I think that, him just being offensive towards her, we've already seen that, and it makes sense that he would be upset with her if he blames her for the business decisions that Edward is making. And so I kind of thought it was just going to be a little bit more of the same, and then I was afraid that it was going to push it to the point where he actually assaulted her, and I was a little disappointed that it did, because I don't think that was entirely necessary, because they already had that conflict there. I don't think they had to go that extra step.
Yeah, and it's not like we needed it's not like we needed Richard Gere to prove himself to be a good person by combating this threat off of her. He already showed his changed character and his compassion at the office when he decided not to go with that deal. So I think like that whole thing could have just been cut.
Yeah, I agree.
And he just comes back to the hotel and she's gone.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think it necessarily made me think more highly of Richard Gere. In a way, I think it almost made me feel like, okay, well, you put her in this situation because you told this man when you shouldn't have, her profession. And also, I mean, this is the kind of person that you spend your days with and that you said that you already trusted. So I don't know. I kind of feel like, he put her in this situation.
Yeah. And I was reading an article and they made a good point that their fight, it really turns it. He gets her off of her, and the conflict is that he was on top of her. But then it switches to it's about them. It's not about the action that just occurred. And he doesn't call Stucky out for it. He doesn't call him like he should, like, you know, you're a rapist, you just try to rape her. No, it goes back to them with the business deal, and they were friends for each other, and it's been 10 years. So, I mean, I can kind of see that because, as we know, like, rape is more of a power move. So his actions weren't to so much hurt Julia Roberts' character as it was to hurt Richard Gere's character. So ultimately, it was about Richard Gere. But I do think that it could have benefited by calling Stuckey's character out, by calling him a rapist or calling out his actions, at least. I think, you know, I mentioned that it relates to West Side Story because West Side Story had that same issue, though they went far worse. Like that was straight up, that was almost sexual assault, if not, debatably sexual assault. And it was, I watched the remake. I know you haven't, but in the remake, they still have that scene in there. And I was a little disappointed. I thought, man, Spielberg, I thought you were going to go ahead. You were going to cut that out because it's a controversial scene. And instead, they have, I forget her name. She was in the original one as Anita. And she's
Rita Moreno.
She's an EGOT winner.
Rita Moreno.
Rita Moreno. Her character then goes to the boys, and she calls them out, and she literally calls them rapists. And I felt like that was a better way to address the situation, because you're not ignoring it, you're not taking it out, you're addressing it and calling it for what it is. Like, you guys are rapists for that. And I appreciated that more. I don't know if that was Spielberg or the writers or the studio whose decision was that, but whoever it was, kudos for that. And I think that this is something that movie could have benefited from. But again, I'm not holding it too much to it, but I do think that's something that was a big weak in the writing. I wonder if that was even in J.F. Lawton's original draft.
Yeah, I'm not sure. As far as the romantic gesture, though, I don't think he really did enough at the end. I mean, as far as, the big romantic gesture is a common staple with rom-coms. It's the Patrick Dempsey on the tractor. It's and Say Anything with the boombox. Yeah, the boombox. I didn't feel like this was very memorable. I did expect that he was going to have to overcome his fear somehow and get to her of heights. It sets that up pretty early on, so I did expect that in the finale. But he just kind of shows up and is like, all right, baby, come on, let's go.
Well, he's a businessman. He gets straight to the point.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, like that's why I said it felt kind of quick.
It was very quick.
I mean, one, realistic. I mean, if he spent the time to do a whole grand gesture, she would have probably been gone.
True.
He's like, all right, guys. So let me just make sure we got the checklist. We got the horses.
Well, it's not about a grand gesture. It's about a personal gesture. And I felt like it wasn't personal to her. Oh,
okay. Well, I think it was personal, like the way it was set up. Because she wanted somebody, like, she was always thinking a prince would come to her tower. And she was true. In her tower. And he called out for his princess to come down.
I guess I didn't really think about it that way. I guess that's true. A little generic, but, that's what it is.
We can tell what kind of girl you are. Yeah, I need to contact Gene and let him know. Like, hey, man, whatever you're planning to do, make it bigger. Make it well-known, obvious, emphasize it. All of it.
No, I didn't think it was very personal. Like, I didn't think of the fairy tale thing, but also I don't think that was... The fairy tale aspect that it kind of shooed into the movie, I didn't think was very interesting. I was like, this is a little generic.
Yeah. I wonder, too, if that's because we've seen so many grand gestures. And we like, people keep... Because now that is a staple thing. I wonder, before the 90s, before this movie, like, was the bar already raised? But I believe Say Anything predates this. So maybe.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, was Say Anything that grand of a gesture? It was literally a boombox over his head, which I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know. But
I think it had something to do with the movie, if I remember correctly. It tied into other things in the movie, and it felt personal. That was why.
Yeah, just like this fairy tale.
I guess. Oh, it's just such a generic interest, but I'm like, her whole personality is just a fairy tale. A girl who wants a fairy tale. Just kind of, it seemed a little oversimplified, I think. And then, like, why was also, did we not talk about how her stepmother would, or her mother, or whoever would just lock her in the attic? Like, she mentioned that, and I was like, oh, can we unpack this trauma a little bit here?
Wait, what was that?
Because the why she imagined it is because I think her mother would lock her in the attic when she was being bad. And I was like, oh, can we unpack this trauma?
Carrie style.
Yeah. Is there anything else you have in your opinion?
No. I mean, there's really not too much to spoil with this movie because it's fairy tale-esque and we really know how it's going to end, and it's pretty light. I do have one thing in my notes. There's no other time really to mention this, but a lot of people turn down the role or audition for these roles of like Richard Gere's character and Julia Roberts' character. Like so many. There were so many. One that I found interesting was Jennifer Connelly turned down the role for Vivian.
Molly Ringwald too.
Yeah, Molly Ringwald would have been good. But I think Jennifer Connelly, as much as I love her and as beautiful as she is, I don't think she would have been that great for this role. And also I think she's what's it called? She was real young. She would have only been 20 years old during this, and that would have felt a little weird. Yeah.
There is one other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot, and it was a pretty big thing. Can we talk about the payment and the money in this film? Because, okay, as far as she's charging $100 for an hour, and for an entire week she's only charging $3,000. And these prices seem ridiculously low to me. Maybe it was different back then, but I'm like, she should have been charging like a couple more $100 for an hour, and then definitely way more than $3,000 for a whole week.
Well, did you look at the inflation prices? That's the first thing I did, because I thought about that too. I was like, what's the inflation on this? Did you see that?
I did not see that.
It's over $6,000. So she's getting paid about $1,000 a day.
Okay. That's
almost
better. Because I was like, what the heck is with these prices? They're so low. Girl, have some, at least a little bit of, not even just self-respect, just, just be a little bit more business savvy here.
I mean, she also said that she wasn't really getting any work, and they were low on rent money. So this was going to get him out of the hole for a while. And I mean, she also liked the guy, and it's also you're not paying for every hour 24 hours. It's ridiculous. Like, it's also, when they make deals, like when you buy things in bulk. He was buying her time in bulk. He's basically going to Sam's Club.
$3,000 is just low. Like I said, maybe not for standards back then, but definitely for today's standards. That's a very low cost.
Well, I think $6,000 is a good price, like $1,000 a day almost.
For a whole entire week?
For a whole entire week, and they're buying you clothes, and they're pretty cool.
Yeah, the clothes definitely add a lot more. And
you're staying in a penthouse.
Yeah.
And you got Barney downstairs.
But $6,000 is a lot different than $3,000. Like I'm saying, from not including the inflation, I was like shocked when I was hearing those numbers.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's always when watching these old films. Sometimes numbers will shock me, and I gotta look up the inflation.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. It's except for Jurassic World when I was talking about those prices, because that was in modern day, and they still don't make any sense.
Yep.
She understood money more than the Jurassic World cast, that's for sure.
Yeah. So do you think this film holds up for a modern audience? That was something that I wasn't sure about, that if you don't have that nostalgia factor, like, does this hold up for, like, teens today?
I think so. I wouldn't say teens, because this movie wasn't even pitched to teens.
Or young adults today, sorry, younger adults.
Young adults, so like probably above 18, I think will still find this movie to be good. I think there's so many rom-coms now that are geared towards the younger generation, the younger children, the ones under 18, that in now times Pretty Woman wouldn't so much relate to them. One, because no 18-year-old should be able to relate to this, but anyone younger than 18. But it's also that, we have things like, what was the most recent one? Kissing Booth, that whole trilogy on streaming. There's some other big movie on Netflix right now that's doing pretty well, rom-com wise. So I think this works for a young adult audience, like anyone above 20. I think this is going to work for, but anybody else, you're going to feel the date. It's in the 90s. You're going to feel the date, but I think everything else really works well for this film, and I think it holds up.
Yeah, I think that romance sells. It still does well. I think it still has enough chemistry that it's going to work. I think my question is because for me, when I was younger, I didn't think that it was going to hold up. That was part of the reasons what held me back, just because Richard Gere did not seem like the type of leading man that I was used to seeing,
Yeah.
But I think that I agree that there isn't as many rom-coms lately that are being sold to an adult audience. I think there's a lot of like younger teen rom-coms that are on streaming services, but there's not enough that fill that other kind of niche.
Yeah, I think like the rom-coms now, it's not even like rom-coms, it's the rom-coms are being geared towards the younger generation, and then for the younger audience, and then for the older audience, they're getting more of those steamy, scandalous movies. Lots of fare, lots of steaminess. I don't know. I never watched any of those. But like 50 Shades of Grey.
Steaminess.
50 Shades of Grey, 365 Days, which I want to recorded 365 days. That's a rape movie. Fight me all day on it. That movie is about rape, and it glorifies it. So come at me.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that film, and that's okay with me.
Yeah, no. What? How have you not heard it? You of all people.
What do you mean, me of all people?
Not saying that this is your type of movie. What I'm saying is it's like this is the sort of controversy or like a topic you would be interested in.
Okay. Yeah, no, I haven't heard anything about it.
But like a lot of melodrama too. I feel like a lot of people like. Twilight. I feel like romance kind of pushed rom-coms out, and people start like the audience for rom-coms was more focused on the romance, and that romance started to push the comedy out, and they were just focused on that.
Yeah. Like more of the fantasy romance, I think, has gotten really big.
Yes.
So as far as what you would rate this film, what is your final rating?
I want to go with a solid B. I would definitely say a solid B. I kind of want to give it a little bit more, but but that little bit more I want to give it, I also have to take a little bit away because of the writing. But there's some things this is an enjoyable movie. Like, I don't know if I would go out and rewatch this purposely, but if somebody was asking me, hey, we should do a rom-com marathon, or someone hasn't seen Pretty Woman and is interested in seeing it, or this is also a movie that if I'm flipping through channels, if I actually had satellite or cable, but if I'm in a hotel or something and I'm just flipping through and this is on, I'll leave it on no matter where it's at. I find it that enjoyable of a movie.
Yeah, I agree. I was also going to give it a solid B. There are definitely some things that are predictable, but that's the genre. And there's some things that the writing could have been a little bit better on, but I do think this is a very enjoyable movie. And while it's not going to be my favorite rom-com of all time, it definitely had me smiling.
Hey, quit that out. Hey, I don't know if we have licensing for that, but I will tell you guys. So I mentioned it earlier in this episode already that what we have up next is Jaws. Yeah, that's right. Somebody here hasn't seen Jaws.
Not in its entirety, no.
Yeah, so we wanted to do a blockbuster movie because we are in the summer of blockbusters, and this will be our last chance to really do a blockbuster before the end of the summer. So why not go with one of the biggest blockbusters, the one that started the blockbusters, Jaws by Steven Spielberg. So go ahead and join us for that next assignment. Go ahead, watch Jaws. It's already a classic movie regardless of what we think society is going to tell you to go ahead and watch it. But if you want to wait and see what we have to say, see if we recommend that movie, then by all means, go ahead, wait. And while you're waiting, if you want to get in touch with us, the ladies, if you want to get in touch with us, Caitlyn, where can they find us?
You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at OpSilverScreen. On Facebook, we're at Operation Silverscreen, but on Twitter and Instagram, it is OpSilverscreen. We do have a bunch of different content on there and different recommendations and just some more themed posts throughout the month. You can also find us on our personal letterboxes if you want to see some of the reviews and things that we're watching throughout the week that we might not be able to discuss on here. You can find Bryant at Swank Seal, that's capital S, and me, I'm going to be at Coffee Spoon Kate, that's Coffee Spoon CAIT.
Yeah, definitely make sure you join us on for the social media. We want to hear your opinions. I believe there was some kind of debate we were having in this episode. I already forgot what it was, but I'm sure you guys will remember. Let us know what you think. And we do have a lot of movie suggestions on our Twitter and Instagram, so go ahead and follow that. There are a lot of great films out there. You know, if you're one of those people that say, hey, I don't know what to watch, they don't make good things anymore. Hey, no. I know we do a lot of classics, but the modern age is still very well filled with great films. So, till the next assignment, we'll be in HQ. I'm Bryant.
And I'm Caitlyn.
See you.